Okay, we're continuing to provide an overview of this book, the book which is The Pursuit of Human Well-Being, uh, The Untold Global History. And what we're going to do in this video is to provide some sort of a summary, or maybe a kind of a synopsis of the first chapter, which is the search of the search the search for well-being from ancient to modern times. And this chapter is authored by Richard Estes. And Richard Estes is a professor emeritus of social work and social policy in the School of Social Policy and Practice of the University of Pennsylvania. This is, of course, located in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, in the United States. Okay, well, let me kind of give you a feel of what this chapter is about. I'm going to kind of read to you, the introduction part that gives a feel for what the chapter is all about. The search for well-being is central to the process of becoming a more fully developed human being. At the center of well-being is a deep sense of peace, personal satisfaction, and happiness within ourselves and our relationships with others. All four of these states of being, peace, personal satisfaction, happiness, and well-being, are outcomes achieved through a combination of personal reflection and interpersonal exchanges. They also are associated with the often complex interplay of the social, political, economic, religious, ideological, and other forces that surround us. Hostile environments, for example, typically breed fear, suspicion, a heightened sense of self-protectiveness, and isolation from others. Excuse me. Mutually supportive and nurturing environments, on the other hand, add to our own efforts, add self-consciousness that enhance our capacity for attaining progressively higher levels of well-being. Thus, our experience of well-being results from a combination of the varied internal and external experiences that impact our lives each day. The process of attaining well-being is an ongoing for many frequently proves to be an elusive one. But it but is this understanding of the nature of well-being the same for all people living today and for those who have lived in the past? Is the fundamental nature of well-being the same the world over? Or are there important differences in the way that people living in different societies and cultures experience well-being? Has the conception of well-being changed over time? And how do the data we have support the truth about our collective trajectory in attaining well-being? Does the nature of well-being differ by age, gender, race, religious beliefs, cultural traditions, income level, and the like? Is well-being a continuous process, or is it a state of being that, once attained, remains the same? How does our search for well-being influence others who are important to us, our spouses, children, friends, and others? In what ways does their for well-being influence our own? Are there alternative pathways to the attainment of well-being? Or is there a time-tested, single, well-trodden path that all of us need to follow to achieve it? What happens if our search for well-being proves uneventful and we do not succeed in achieving the levels of peace, harmony, and balance that we seek? And within the context of societies worldwide, to what extent have leaps forward have been made in our collective well-being, especially since the end of the two great wars that dominated much of the 20th century? This book is an attempt to answer these and other questions related to the nature of well-being over the long expanse of human history, and to identify our collective successes and challenges in attaining well-being over the centuries. Thus, the focus of the book is both historical and contemporary, and draws heavily from alternative conceptions of well-being formulated by people who lived during earlier time periods and under very different social, political, economic, religious, and ideological circumstances. We are particularly interested in documenting similarities and differences in well being between men and women, children and adults, those living at the center of society, and those that survive only along the periphery, and those characterized by different racial, ethnic, religious, and sexual orientation, and other identity defining characteristics. The book examines the history of well-being over a long period and gives particular attention to those individuals and groups characterized by socio-demographic characteristics over which they have little or no control that serve as a basis for discrimination. For example, age, gender, race, physical impairment, and the like. The intellectual journey that we take in this book is a fascinating one and frequently contains some surprises. Our goal is to provide insights into the varied forces that contribute to a sense of well being for people living everywhere in the world. We seek to identify the accomplishments and obstacles revealed by our collective history toward the attainment of well being, and as possible, to use the wisdom of the ages to inform us about how national and international achievements in well being can be furthered. This book, however, is not a self help book. Rather, it is based on serious scientific inquiry into the nature and the state of well being, as far as it can be discerned from a wide range of past and contemporary perspectives. The major ideas contained in this book reflect ideas concerning the nature, dynamics, and potentials associated with well being. We draw our ideas from all areas of the arts and sciences, the humanities and philosophy, and the performing arts, and from different faith traditions. The book is also based on historical analysis of the major themes that have informed our contemporary ideas concerning well being. At the same time, the book is contemporary as it examines the nature of well being, as it is understood today among people living across many regions of the world. We purposefully avoid making assumptions regarding elements that should be regarded as either essential or mandatory for attaining well being. Nor do we assume that the nature of well being is the same for all people living now and in the past, nor that well being is the same for people under different social conditions. We hope, however, that the book provides considerable objective evidence concerning both the nature and dynamics of well being within our diverse human family. We know for sure that the pursuit of well being continues to be a major goal of people throughout the world. We also know with certainty that various pathways that have been followed to attain well being are not a singular reality, but instead are correlated with different approaches to and different levels of the attainment of well being. We believe that all people experience some measure of well being, but that comparatively few experience the deep sense of joy that accompanies the attainment of the highest level of well being. That level of well being appears to be reserved for those who attain remarkable level of consciousness, self awareness, and compassion for others. Some of these persons are identified in this chapter, but most, owing to the absence of written documentation, will never be known to us. Indeed, for most people, their experience of well being is an internal one that is reflected in the quality of the relationships with their children and friends, and in the quiet contributions they make to the lives of others who cross their path. So, right after this, um, Professor Estes puts forward organizing questions and he makes an attempt to answer them. Let me give you an idea of what those organizing questions are. The purpose of this book is to apply a historical lens to the most significant well being changes that have occurred over the long expanse of history. In doing so, we bring together a large body of empirical data related to the changes in five critically important sectors of well being that are universally considered to be among the most important: health, education, social welfare, income and wealth distribution, and subjective assessments of well being. We examine these data from the perspective of the world as a whole, as well as with respect to particular regions, countries, and population groups within countries and regions. In doing so, we have drawn on the contributions made by eminent scholars concerning the nature and meaning of the pathways to well being as reflected across time, geographic space, culture, and philosophical and faith traditions. We have asked our scholars of well being to address, among others, the following questions. What are the key points of data that capture the journey of well being in your area of study, especially within the context of the major indicators captured by the United Nations three-item Human Development Index? What is well-being and what is its relationships to other much sought after states of being? Life satisfaction, fulfillment, and ultimately happiness. How would one recognize well-being when it does exist? How would one recognize its absence? How do various philosophical and faith traditions teach us about well being and the pathways that should be followed in seeking its attainment? Have the historical meanings associated with well being remained constant over time? Or have they fluctuated in response to the unique social, political, or economic conditions that have characterized people and their societies at particular moments in their history? Does well being differ for different population groups? For men versus women? For children versus the elderly? For the poor versus rich? Or for groups that nearly everywhere have been historically disadvantaged on the basis of age, race, ethnicity, language, or accent, religious beliefs, sexual orientation, region, or country of origin, and the like? On the balance, what have been the major gains and well being experienced by people over the long expanse of human history, as reflected in both subjective and objective measures of well being, but especially with respect to health, education, income, social welfare, and subjective assessment of personal and collective well being? I hope this gives you a sense of what this chapter is about. So the chapter is long, and Richard Estes makes a beautiful attempt to address many of those questions as a prelude, to the rest of the book, and we have 20 chapters in that book. Okay, I will leave it at that.